Welcome to the PinkpillRx podcast, hosted by Katie and Jay Fillmore, where we navigate complex and thought-provoking topics surrounding women with a focus on education. For shorter form content, follow us on TikTok, Instagram, or YouTube at Caters88 or PinkpillRx.
That's Kators 88.
If you enjoy this podcast, please give us a follow and maybe a nice review.
We have an exciting announcement specifically for YouTube. So many people have wanted longer form content, like video content that makes it easier to watch the topic series. You know how we cut things up into series, and it's pretty, they're like 1.5 minute long segments like on TikTok or Instagram. So in these YouTube videos, I'm putting these series all together so that you can watch them in chronological order, and I'm putting them in 30-minute YouTube video segments. So if you are interested in that, you can watch on our YouTube playlist. Long Form Pink Pill Series is the playlist name. There's also a 2-hour, 45-minute long video that you can buy that covers our content from April of 24 to October of 24. That's available on our Etsy shop for $10. We also have a Pink Pill Game on our Etsy shop. We have our game only, which is $5.99, but then we also have our Pink Pill Complete game, which includes insights and statistics, and that's $9.99. If you use the promo code podcast, you can get that for 20% off, and that would apply to any of our Etsy shop items. That promo code is good through the end of April. Other ways you can support us is subscribe and follow this podcast, leave a podcast review, subscribe to our Patreon, and even send us topic ideas. Even better if they come with sources. I do all of the research independently. It is very time consuming, so I love it when people send me ideas, especially when they come with sources, because that makes my job so much easier. And I love that you guys are also so in it with me. And lastly, just sending us encouragement is always appreciated. Your kind words go a really long ways, because we're doing this just to do this, to get this information out there. And that encouragement just keeps us going. Anyways, hey, Jay.
Hey.
We're here.
Yep.
Again.
Another day, another statistic, another mind-blowing experience for me.
I want to start this episode out by reading a couple quotes from comments, and I just want to get your reactions to them.
Okay.
So one is, women are uniquely positioned as the only species expected to form intimate bonds with their natural predators, men, which is a dynamic that's shaped by societal constructs and power imbalances.
1 minute. I need 1 second. Whew. That feels icky. Like that just, I don't know, that just feels like some type of like Stockholm syndrome.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like it's almost like that just feels like that is so out of order with like nature. And so just like you can't even cut a break from birth, because that's the trajectory or the path that you're on to do that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Of course you know what I mean. What am I talking about? Of course you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Wow. Can I just ramble and you can edit this?
Absolutely. And I do want to say, because I know we do have some male listeners, is again, there's this knee-jerk reaction. Not all men are predators. Not all men.
I literally was thinking that in my head.
Does that but unknown men is unknown. It's the fact that you're an unknown man. Mm-hmm. Actually, I heard a great analogy about this. Okay. I'm going to say it and then you can monologue.
Okay.
Not all ticks carry Lyme disease.
Oh, keep going.
But we do know that some ticks carry Lyme disease.
Right.
And therefore, what do? We try to avoid
all of them. All
ticks. Because some of them do carry Lyme disease, and that's a chronic disease that will stick with you for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
A lot. I should say sometimes it's curable if you catch it soon enough. But a lot of them, yes, it is this long-term thing. So not all men are predators. Some men are predators.
But when you're unknown, you don't know which one.
But when you're an unknown man, we don't know which one.
Right. Can you read the comment again one more time?
Women are uniquely positioned as the only species expected to form intimate bonds with their natural predators, men, a dynamic shaped by societal constructs and power imbalances.
That immediately makes me think of, okay, yeah, not all men are predators. Absolutely not. But you don't know which is which. So it's like you have to like slowly dip your toe in the pool to check the temperature of the water with each new man you're introduced to. Or, you know what I mean? Like, or you're going to have some type of tertiary relationship, or you're interested in. Yeah. You have to be so like careful and slow and like on alert, high alert probably. Because you don't know what type of person he is. And I think that like, you're not, I thought of that because you're not expected to form intimate bonds with every man, you know, just one that you want. But so in my mind, it's like, yeah, well, that quote, like you're not really expected to form intimate bonds with your own predator. But what you are required to do is vet anyone you want to have an intimate bond with because they could be a predator. I don't have to do that.
No, men don't have to do that.
Because it's not like you're expected to form intimate bonds with every man. It's just one. But then you have to do so much vetting because you don't know if he's dangerous or not. And dangerous doesn't mean like physical abuse or sexual assault. It can even be financial abuse or emotional manipulation or gaslighting or any types of things that you don't know about this person. I mean, I feel like gaslighting and any type of narcissistic tendency, you don't see that right away. You're a charming person, you know? And so like, how long? Oh my gosh, how long in a relationship do you as a woman have to like in your mind vet this person to see if there's any red flags for something that can harm you? Because for like me, like for a guy in a relationship, you're not really trying to screen for like that. I mean, yeah, you don't want to be with somebody who's going to be manipulating you or something like that. But I'm not really too worried about the other stuff. So more the vetting is like, is there chemistry? Are we compatible? Do we have similar interests? You know, are there any red flags that we're going to be clashing about? Not, oh, am I going to be harmed by this person necessarily? At least that's my take as a guy.
Yeah. A narcissist often begins to reveal their true colors once the initial idealization of the love bombing phase fades. This can happen as early as like 3 to 4 months into the relationship. Though subtle red flags may appear sooner, the timeline varies with each, individual, and they can keep up this facade, a lot of them for up to a year or more before overt devaluation and manipulation becomes evident. The shift typically occurs when the narcissist feels secure in the relationship or when their partner starts setting boundaries, at which point controlling or abusive behaviors begin to emerge.
Got it. So there's a long vetting period.
Yeah, so, I think a good way to vet if somebody's a narcissist is to set boundaries early.
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah. And then see how they react to it.
See how they react
What's
to your
an
boundaries.
example of a boundary that you could see being set early? Or a couple of examples, I don't know. I wonder if it's like case by case, like, oh, he invites you to something that he's excited about, but you have an obligation already that's important to you. And you say, I'm so sorry, I can't make it. I'm already obligated to this. I've been planning this for a long time. See how he reacts to that. Is that a good example of one?
Yeah, and I think like personal space boundaries, like I love spending time with you, but I also need space to recharge.
Mm-hmm.
Or establishing privacy boundaries.
Yeah.
Physical boundaries, of course. Even financial boundaries, about who's paying for things and things like that.
Yeah, I was just thinking about financial boundaries too.
There's just things that you can do early on in a relationship to try to, I think, test that. But narcissists are very good. That's why they're so successful.
Yeah.
That's why so many of them end up with a spouse or a significant other.
Yeah. Whew.
Okay, next quote. Are you ready?
Yeah, I'm ready.
If we don't need feminism, explain this to me. Why is a room full of women most men's dream, but for most women, a room full of men is a nightmare?
How would you define feminism?
It's a socio-political movement. It's an ideology. It advocates for social and economic and political equality of the sexes. So it challenges systemic inequalities rooted in patriarchy. It aims to dismantle gender stereotypes and wants to improve opportunities for women across all aspects of life. Also, I want to say that feminism theory also emphasizes intersectionality, recognizing how overlapping identities such as race, gender, class, things like that contribute to oppression.
Okay, so a part of feminism would that be about women's safety? So, like, equality would also be equality of safety.
Yes.
So, if nothing else, feminism as defined as you just defined it, specifically, then is definitely needed because there's not equality of safety.
No. At a base level.
Mm-hmm.
And when you think about safety on Maslow's hierarchy of needs, it's at the bottom.
Like the second rung, I think.
Yeah,
security.
I mean, it is real low.
Yeah. You know what? Here's an interesting hot take. People might be mad at me for this idea. I just had it, though, okay? This is not like a prolonged ideology of mine. But would it be beneficial for those involved in feminist movements to initially focus on the lowest rungs of the hierarchy of needs first and pour all of your resources into that? Because then you're addressing physical needs of women that are not met because of income inequality. Food, water, shelter, the very bottom one. Security and safety. And then you're moving up. I think physical safety also has to do with reproductive rights, like we've talked about, and things like that. When it comes to like all these crazy cases that we've talked about on the show is what I mean. And I think that's a safety issue.
Yeah, the
Physical
pyramid
safety.
goes physiological needs, so like basic survival, food, water, air, sleep, like you said, shelter. Then there's safety needs, so security, stability, health and protection from harm.
So medical stuff is all in that second rung too.
Yeah,
All these
so much
medical
of the stuff we
inequalities.
haven't even gotten past rung 2.
Yeah.
Then it's love and belonging. So emotional connections like friendships, family bonds, intimacy. Maybe if guys want to have more relationships with women, we need to be focusing on these physiological and safety needs so that women can actually feel safe to form family bonds and intimate bonds.
Right.
The next one is esteem needs, which is recognition, self-respect, confidence, and achievement. And then number 5 is the self-actualization, which is like the personal growth and fulfillment of one's potential.
It just struck me. I think that the majority of feminist movements are all about the bottom 2 rungs. Almost all. I mean, think about it. All the medical stuff, second rung. Income inequality that makes it hard to meet your basic needs, first rung. All kinds of stuff that we have talked about on the show are in those bottom 2. So like we're literally just trying to get women out of fight or flight in the bottom 2 rungs, right?
Yeah.
And that's really sad.
That's
really sad because it's important to talk about representation in government and representation in the corporate world and stuff like that, but that's more towards the top 2. And I'm not saying they're not important or they shouldn't be talked about, but it's so sad that the majority of issues are in these bottom 2, these most basic fundamental needs.
That's a great point.
Wow. That struck me. That's very, very heartbreaking and disheartening.
Yeah. Okay, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to play a clip.
Mm-hmm.
It is a TikTok. I did get permission to do this and to play this from the original creator. The creator's name is Boobs McGee 5678, which I appreciate that username. Boobs McGee. I asked her if I could use this clip. I thought it was great insight. So I'm just going to go ahead and play it and then get kind of your opinion or reaction to it.
Sure.
But men kind of build society to court other men in order to enter relationships with women. Let me cook. And what if the reason why the alpha male podcast bro alt-right pipeline is so strong is because men are subconsciously crashing out that they are being denied relationships with women by women? That's why I don't think it's a male loneliness epidemic. I think it's a male entitlement epidemic. Because all throughout patriarchy, men have been the ones deciding who women married. Women have been bargaining tools, business mergers, family mergers, negotiation tactics. But all in all, pawns that men traded between one another. This is truly the first time in the history of patriarchal society that women are allowed to decide what relationships they enter. Men used to have to court and woo other men for the affection of a woman. Fathers paid husbands to get daughters off of their hands, to transfer property ownership to the husband. Long story short, men are used to being accepted or denied by other men regarding relationships with women. It is genuinely a novel concept for a woman to be able to tell a man no, and for that no to have any level of weight. There is a reason why telling a man I'm not interested at the bar is less successful than I have a boyfriend. And that is also to say that violence against women was seen as a slight against her man. And so the defense of women was much more pertinent because it was a defense of one's own manly honor. Men perceiving women as someone's daughter, someone's sister, someone's mom. But patriarchy made men entitled to women. And not in the obvious way, in the it is not women who can deny me relationships with women kind of way. Because women were property, currency, for exchanges between men, and now they aren't. Oh, so you just don't think people could be in love until women had human rights? Well, I think the feeling of love has always been real and important and necessary and constant. But I also think it's pretty hard to differentiate feelings of love when your capacity to survive society is in relationship to the love that you have to feel for your partner. Governing bodies recognize property. It is fairly recently that governing bodies started recognizing and implementing human rights, civil rights. And again, these women were property. So it's like a patriarchy is like a millennia-long Stockholm syndrome. In the past 60 years, post-World War II, has been like the women have been let out of the dungeon. I definitely took the long way home on this one. But my point is, men today are grappling with having to actually be in relationships with women in order to be in relationships with women. And rather than adapt with women's relatively newfound footing, we're getting crash outs. We're getting the manosphere alt-right pipeline. We're getting mass influxes of incel culture. We're getting attacks on women's reproductive freedoms, attacks on women's civic freedoms. If you haven't looked into the SAVE Act and what it does for women who have changed their name when they get married and it doesn't match their birth certificate, or the repealing affirmative action, white women were the #1 benefactors of affirmative action. It's like patriarchy's extinction burst, almost. And all because women are allowed to say no.
I thought that was a hot take.
Yeah. I have some thoughts about it.
Yeah.
First, I want to give reverence for all the history lessons she just gave, because I don't think it always resonates with men, and I speak from my personal experience, it doesn't always resonate with me, that for centuries and millennia that you would have been considered property. That is crazy. And it's probably crazy for me to think about as a white man, because I don't have a lineage that's involved with any type of enslavement or any type of like oppression like that. You know what I mean?
Like white men haven't experienced that, you mean?
Yeah.
Not that you haven't inflicted it, but that you don't have a lineage that experienced.
That's been on the receiving end of that?
Yes, I just wanted to clarify that.
Yeah. So like for me to try and wrap my mind around being seen as property, and especially with it hitting closer to home with this, because although I'm not a person of color, and not to say that I haven't tried to wrap my mind around that through friendships and through like education and stuff like that, but you are like my immediate family, you and my 4 daughters would have been property. I would have been trying to sell off my daughters. Like what the heck? Look, that to really pause and think about that in response to what she said is just crazy. Like, holy cow, like holy crap. So like that was a very, very well presented history lesson about that, you know? And I do think that the guys being so having a visceral reaction to being rejected by a woman, you know, no man who's alive today, who's of courting age, I should say, was ever alive when women being property was a thing, or pre-World War II, like she mentioned. So it wouldn't be like, oh, this is now new for me. Like, no, we never experienced the older system, you know? But I think epigenetically, 3 to 8 generations back, that was what it was like. And then epigenetically, that gets passed on. So that could be present in there. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Like you inherit those things from your ancestors epigenetically.
Yeah, and if you think of like all of time, it being this way,
Mm-hmm.
all the way up until very recent history, like because it's still going on, it's still happening. That globally speaking, this is still reality for many, many, many women.
Mm-hmm.
Just on an evolutionary basis, kind of like what you're talking about. How many more hundreds of years before, assuming women remain autonomous in the places that they remain like in the places that they are autonomous now,
Mm-hmm.
like let's just assume that stays the same, which in the United States it's a huge risk that it's not going to stay the same, but let's just say that it does. How many hundreds of years before that behavior or that mindset or those epigenetics, that evolutionary, women are owned property, does that get worked out of the bones?
Mm-hmm. Well, think about the majority of people who would have procreated. The majority of men who would have procreated would have been married, and would have been married through this idea of property or this idea of, political entanglements and stuff like that. And so survival of the fittest is those men won, those men procreated and passed on their genes. Whereas men who perhaps were not operating that way maybe didn't get married. Because you're talking about poor, like I'm thinking from my lineage, like serfs in Europe type thing. Like you're not marrying for political reasons. You might not be viewing your spouse as property. But how many kids are you going to have? How many are going to survive because you're poor? You know what I mean? So I wonder if most of the survival of the fittest, most of those genes that survived came from men who did use, political entanglements and property and stuff like that.
No, but I do disagree that that serfs and stuff like that didn't view women as property. Serfs in medieval Europe were generally viewed women, particularly female serfs, as part of the lord's property rather than independent individuals. So female serfs were bound to their lords, and their marriages, work, and reproductive roles were often regulated to serve the lord's interest. For instance, lords could dictate whom a serf woman married and impose fines for marriage or sexual acts deemed inappropriate by the church. Additionally, a serf woman's status was inherited by her children, perpetuating her subjugation. While women in higher social classes had more autonomy, serf women were largely treated as laborers and dependents within the rigid hierarchy of feudal society.
Oh my God. Well, I was way off. Holy crap.
Back to the epigenetics thing, then you talk about what does that do to women, epigenetically speaking.
Right,
and we're expecting women to just be arms open to all men, because not all men. So.
Right, but you've inherited all these other things from previous generations before you.
Yes.
Wow. Yeah, that's a very good point. I do want to mention another thing about like her alt-right pipeline thing. I also thought about was, and I mentioned this to you the other day, I think part of what pushes men to the right is the alt-right. They feel like there's not a place for them on the left because they're villainized for just being male. And I'm not saying that's the thing, but I'm saying that's a factor too. And so it's what happens when you when there's dehumanizing rhetoric about men on the left. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's a factor too. I do think there's definitely I think about her example of like a guy getting rejected at the bar or something like that. And he gets so enraged. Where does that come from? Yeah, I'm sure there's epigenetics involved, like in relation to what this TikToker was saying. But I'm also wondering, that can't be the only thing. Where is all that rage? Is it because you feel powerless? Is there a powerless feeling, or is there a self-esteem issue, like you've just been attacked because you were rejected and it feels personal, and then you're enraged because you've been rejected and it feels personal and you can't handle it. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Where does that come from?
I don't know. I'm not a man.
Well, let me ponder one second here. I don't know why the guy at the bar gets so mad.
I'm going to just throw out a Google search because I'm just like genuinely curious what it has to say. So 1 second. Why do men get so mad when rejected?
Yeah, are you covering embarrassment with anger as a secondary emotion because you're not out of touch with your primary ones?
Now this is on the spot, okay, guys? This is not something I've done a deep dive in. This was on the spot. So from an evolutionary perspective, historically rejection could threaten reproductive success and social survival, leading to strong emotional responses like anger or sadness. Aggression may be evolved as a way to assert dominance or protect status when faced with rejection. Masculine honor beliefs. Some men internalize societal norms that equate rejection with the loss of power or respect, prompting aggressive responses to restore perceived status. And then psychological impact. Rejection can breed feelings of inadequacy and anger, especially if it is persistent or perceived as unfair. These emotions may fuel hostility towards rejectors.
I mean, that makes sense to me. There's obviously no emotional regulation there. What did she say again about guys being pushed to the alt-right? Like, what was the cause she was saying?
Cause being, I believe, on an evolutionary perspective, that men are bonding with men to control women.
Yeah. That is interesting because I would wager so much of that is subconscious.
Yes, I agree. I think it is subconscious. I don't think that they're consciously doing that, but that is what is happening in reality. I mean, men are bonding together to control women's bodies.
Interesting. Yeah,
and their right to vote and all kinds of stuff.
That is it's almost like you're operating more from a baser instinct level than from a more like higher order thinking level.
You know,
I think so.
Yeah.
I think that's very base. Okay, let me say this. I think that's a very base instinct level of operating versus like using more of the evolved part of your brain. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like, it's stuck in your subconscious. You haven't done any work to make what's in your subconscious conscious. And now you can be aware of it and you can make your own choice versus you're just operating on programming.
Don't you think that? Yeah, I don't think a lot of people in general do that or are interested in making their subconscious conscious.
No, well, I think that's that's higher on Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Mm-hmm. And in this economy, I don't know. I don't think as many people are up there. I think you're just trying to survive.
Yeah.
That's no excuse. That's a secondary comment just in general. Because there's no excuse for that type of behavior.
Mm-hmm. Somebody had asked me, I had reposted the original man versus bear debate video. Mm-hmm. And in that video, you had eventually conceded that you would choose a man over a bear. Do you remember that?
Yeah. For me personally?
No, for a kid, for your daughter. Mm-hmm. You had eventually said, fine, man. Mm-hmm. Like eventually, after a huge, long debate. Okay. Would you still choose man?
No. All the stories and all the statistics, like it. I don't know what would happen to her.
Yeah.
With a stranger who's a man.
Somebody wanted me to ask you this question.
Mm-hmm.
Would you rather be in the woods with a bear or shower in prison?
In the woods with a bear, man. Absolutely, I'd be in the woods with a bear.
Like, isn't that crazy?
Yeah, that's why I have a fear of going to prison. Not that I've ever done anything. I like being falsely accused and going to prison.
Like the ultimate fear of that is what would happen to your body.
Yeah.
So that fear that you feel thinking about that, women have to walk around with that fear of what's going to happen to my body.
So that's like I could use that as a somewhat comparative feeling.
Yes.
Whoa, I feel it lower in my stomach, like it's not anxiety, it's like a terror. So that's what that feels like, huh? Something like that.
Something like that.
That is actually very helpful for empathizing. How often do you walk around feeling like that? that type of fear.
Well, I did get nervous the other day walking to my car because there was that guy that was hanging out by my car.
Yeah, and you called me.
And he was like watching me
Mm-hmm.
as I was walking to my car. And so that fear of creeping up, like I like quickly grabbed my phone and I quickly called you.
Yeah.
Because again, not all men, just like not all ticks carry Lyme disease.
Yeah.
But we don't know which ones.
Right.
The scariest men to me are white men. This was a middle-aged white man watching me.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I totally agree with that. You know, the rage I feel about situations like the stories that were shared and like your situation with the dude with the car brings up this like very strong, probably more base instinct feeling of like, I want to fight and really hurt somebody. And you know I don't get that way. But my point, though, is not that. My point is that's the base instinct men should have, not like oppressing a woman or feeling enraged that you were rejected or getting aggressive. Like it's that deeper, more base instinct should be like for protection and sending a message to people like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think that is positive masculinity.
Because like
I think it's just masculinity, healthy masculinity, healthy.
Yeah, because there's a lot of talk about toxic masculinity, and that type of language, since it's in the negative, can make men feel more alienated on the left. But if there's also a conversation about healthy masculinity, that's more inspiring, that's more including, it's more celebrating things that are innately part of yourself. And then I think there needs to be more talk about what healthy masculinity looks like and not only what toxic masculinity looks like. I think you got to talk about the toxic stuff, but I think you also have to couple it with talking about the healthy stuff. Otherwise, there's almost like men can feel a lack of inclusion.
Yeah.
You know, because there is a lot of healthy stuff too, but
yeah.
I think that needs to be fleshed out, talked about, celebrated, that type of stuff.
Thanks for hanging out with us today.
I hope for those of you listening, something was intriguing or sparked a curiosity, or you felt affirmed or challenged. Stay educated. Take the pink pill. If you enjoyed this podcast, please give us a follow and maybe a nice review.